Thank you so much, Ayaan, for joining us. Now, there was a terrorist attack recently in Munich, just before the Munich Security Conference, in which a young Afghani man ploughed into a crowd of people. Several people have died, obviously many more were injured. What do you make of the response to that terrorist attack in Europe? Do you think that European elites are taking Islamic terrorism seriously enough?
No. I mean, they do come out with the normal platitudes. They condemn the attack, and then they say very nice things about the victims. It shouldn't have happened. But it's in the hands. The elites have the power to do something about it, and they don't have the political will to do anything about it. So if the answer is, do they take it seriously? I think they do think it's a serious crime, but they don't take any steps to change that reality.
At that security conference, J.D. Vance made a famous speech now criticizing Europe for its policies on migration, but also on freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Do you agree with JD's critique of the European elites?
I absolutely 100% agree with JD, whom we now have got to say Vice President JD's critique. And it's very much what I've been saying for many years, and many of us were saying. But he's used his amazing platform, his office, to come forward and say these things, and I think that's just fantastic. I think yesterday I tweeted that he is the most popular American in Europe right now. So it's a boost for European citizens that the American Vice President is saying for them what they've been saying and thinking and complaining about and voting about for many, many years now, at least 2 decades.
On both issues of freedom of speech and migration, there are tie-ins with Islamism and Islamization of Europe. So let's take migration as one issue. Do you think that the current US administration is the first one in a long time to take the issue of the Islamization of Europe seriously?
Migration. You said let's begin with migration.
So talking about mass migration
Yeah.
in that context of bringing Islam into Europe.
So on the context of mass migration, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, the administration in the United States is doing exactly what they promised. So in the lead up to the election, migration was a big issue, and they campaigned on, if we are elected, Trump, Vance, if we are elected, we will start deportations immediately, which they have done. I think that inspires Europeans. They can see it can be done. And so elections matter, people's votes matter, people's voice matters. Now, the immigration in terms of numbers that the US is dealing with from radical Islam is very different from Europe. Most immigrants to Europe are from Muslim countries. They come then into a ready-made infrastructure of Islamization that the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist groups have set up, and then the process of ghettoization starts almost immediately. Can European leaders do something about that, break up that infrastructure, deport the leaders, and start a program of homogenization, of assimilation into the system? Yes, they can do it. They have the resources for doing that. They can change the laws. They can close the borders. They can withdraw from these treaties, the Asylum Treaty, 1951 Geneva Convention, the ECHR. They can do all of these things, but they're not doing it. And so the voters, European voters, are left looking at America and thinking, well, hang on, they can do it. Maybe we can do it. And I think that was, J.D. Vance's, Vice President J.D. Vance's message was not just this is what needs to be done. We need to emphasize what the values are that unite us. Immigrants haven't the electorate have not voted for this kind of immigration. Free speech must be protected. He said all these things, and these are fantastic things. But his very presence also shows, look, we're doing it. It can be done. And if you want to do it, Europeans, you have our support.
Now, I know that you have a very proud history of defending freedom of speech, particularly when it comes to criticizing Islam. Do you think that in Europe at the moment, and particularly in Britain, seeing as this is GB News, there is a two-tier system where people who critique Islam or, for example, maybe burn a Quran are treated in one way, and the people who are actually Islamists and maybe even support extremist narratives are treated in another way?
Yes, absolutely, because this whole ideology of multiculturalism is implemented in Europe, and multiculturalism dictates that minorities need to be exempted from justice and from, treated the way the law treats them. So, as a white man, I can come and call you anything, and I'll get away with it because I'm black and I'm female and all the rest of it. Multiculturalism dictates that. So the fact that you have a two-tier system is not a surprise at all. You adopted it. I mean, you meaning Europe-wide. So yes, Europeans are watching the harassment, sometimes the gang rape of women on the streets in places like Munich, Berlin, Paris, London, different parts of Sweden. They're watching all of this happen, and these horrible crimes are perpetrated by members of a minority and, encouraged within a religion and a religious context that belongs to a minority. And the law is saying, well, there's nothing we can do about that because they're a minority. So there's definitely a two-tier system, but it's deliberate.
And do you think that it should be illegal to burn a Quran? We saw several cases recently of people being arrested and prosecuted for doing exactly that. Recently there was a chap who burned a Quran outside of the Turkish consulate in London, and then a man ran out of the consulate with a knife and started sort of swiping at him.
Yeah.
Both of them were convicted, not just the man with the knife. So do you think it's right that we should make it illegal to burn a Quran?
What I think is banning the Quran in Saudi Arabia is illegal because it's a Muslim country where Sharia law applies. Banning the Quran in Britain or in Sweden is foolish. It's not something I would do. It's provocative, but it's not illegal. And it's only illegal because, again, like I said, you have this two-tier system where the religion of a minority are protected. But then you have to ask the question, what is the cost of that? At what cost? And so, in Sweden, Momika had two things to deal with. First, the prosecution from the government of Sweden. And then he got killed by Islamists who found him guilty of violating Sharia law. Now, what has Sweden got out of this? Because in adopting multiculturalism, Sweden was hoping for social cohesion and social harmony. That is the reasoning behind the bringing in of hate laws. Hate laws are blasphemy laws. And so what you have now in Sweden is you've got the censorship, you've got the hate laws, but you also have the Islamists killing people who violate Sharia law or making life terrible and unsafe for them. The logical thing for Sweden to have done right at that moment was to have immediately repealed all the hate laws and all the blasphemy laws and says, well, in this case, this is the lesson we have learned, is multiculturalism doesn't work. And because multiculturalism doesn't work, then you have to bring back what really works. And what really works is for the nation state to say that all citizens, regardless of whether they are minority or not, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their gender, are equal before the law and treat them accordingly.
You've been talking about these issues for decades now. I just wonder whether you think the tide is turning in any way towards your direction. I know in Britain we have Keir Starmer, so perhaps that's not particularly productive. In the United States, obviously, you must be happy about the current administration. But across Europe as a continent, do you see the tide turning against Islamization and so on and towards your point of view?
The tide is turning and has turned quite a bit. In Britain, I think you're going through what we went through in America so you're pretty much where we were in America in 2020. And then we had 4 years of Biden and Harris. And that's what generated the, amazing majority that has led to this government. And so in Britain, if you live through 4 years of Keir Starmer and some of his appalling policies, and he may or may not bring in Islamophobia. But whatever he does, you live through that, you're going to find that people will be so fed up that the next government has to be a government of change. It's not a government of platitudes. It's not a government of promising, oh, we're going to do better, this, that, and the other. It has to be a government of change, because then you get that fork in the road that Elon Musk talks about, which is really you've only got two options, which is decline, which is what Keir Starmer is all about, and then obviously collapse, or you've got to restore the British nation state to its institutional competency, which is what's gone, and to listening, to being a democracy. In all of these European countries, citizens go to the polls and they vote, and the
and they need to be heard.
The elections have no consequences. How long can you keep this up? And it's in the name of democracy that censorship has been introduced and is implemented and is enforced. It's in the name of democracy that populist parties that gain considerable votes are demonized and accused of all sorts of things that they haven't done, and then that's the way the electorate is silenced.
Well, one place where that has happened is Germany, and they're having an election on Sunday. The AfD has been ostracized and isolated by all the other political parties.
Yeah.
What's your view on the German elections? Are you supportive of the AfD?
So I do not read German and I don't understand it, but what I have done is read the manifesto in English, what's available online about the AfD, and I don't find anything in there that makes me feel that what they're seeking is anything other than what the electorate wants, which is this. The German electorate, like the British, the Americans and others, they want control over their own nation state. They want control over their own parliament. They want control over their own future. They want their borders closed. They want the economy to run in their own interest, in the interest of their own citizens. As far as I can tell, that's what the AfD is saying. And when I listen to the SPD and to the CDU, the Christian Democrats, they're saying the way to prosperity and the way to stability is through the European Union. They talk about working together with partners, and they have all of these vague ideas, but it is more of the same. It's what the voters are voting out. And so in that sense, I would say the AfD is the party, Alice Weidel. She seems to me to be the one who is attuned to what the voter is saying, what the voter wants. Now, the other parties don't like that, and they're threatening to close down the AfD, which is very undemocratic, and it's what I think JD was implying is, but that's not democracy. You can't shut down democracy in the name of democracy.
When it comes to migration and Islam, which country are you most concerned about in Europe?
Well, I think it's Sweden. Looks like Sweden may be turning a corner. Maybe they've had this terrible experience that they're coming around. But in the first month of 2025, in January, they had what they call 27 explosions, which is a euphemism for, it's almost like a civil war. You know, if you have those types of grenades and guns and things going off in Sweden, of all places. And then in the year 2024, they had 317 of these explosions. They have gangs that are using children, they're training children and arming them and then sending them off as hitmen. And the problems are spilling over into Denmark and Norway and other places. So Sweden is where the Prime Minister came out and said, we've lost control of society. We've lost control of, the monopoly of violence. That's what it amounts to. And that is a breakdown of the social contract. So I'm worried about Sweden more, but maybe a little less because they're actually admitting that they have a problem. The countries that you ought to worry more about are the ones which have gigantic problems, like Britain, like France, like Germany, that are not even admitting that they have a problem. Yeah.
So step one is admit you've got the problem, and then you can do something about it.
Well, yeah, first you admit that is you've got to be honest and transparent, which for me is a serious grown-up way of engaging with reality, where you say, okay, this is the problem, even if it's a huge, what seems like an insurmountable problem. The first step is to engage with reality, and I find the leadership in the UK, in Germany, in France, incapable of engaging with just what's in front of their eyes.
Ayaan, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Always good.